Canada's International Development Research Centre here in Nairobi. And welcome to all the participants online as well. I am Kathryn Toure. I am the Regional Director for IDRC for Eastern and Southern Africa here in Nairobi with a team of 35 people. So I'm very excited about the launch of the second edition of the Global Data Barometer report. We're going to hear more about it today and its importance and the difference that it's going to make. So some special thanks to the Local Development Research Institute, and I have the director sitting next to me, and the Latin America Open Data Initiative. If you're online and you're from the Latin America Data Initiative, just raise your hand. No, not, okay. So these two organizations helped to put this event together. So welcome. And thank you to everyone who's participating and everybody who's watching this video. So I'd like to express some gratitude to Silvana Fumega. Silvana is the project director at the Latin America Open Data Initiative for the Global Data Barometer project. We'll be joining online from Argentina or watching this video later. And then we have Muchiri Nyaggah, Executive Director of the Land Development Research Institute, who is a regional partner for the Global Data Barometer in Africa. So I'd like to emphasize a few things. First of all, we all know how important data is as a public good in today's world. And we know it's important with the realities of artificial intelligence, digital governance, and even shrinking civic space. And Africa is at a critical juncture when it comes to data use, and we have to find balance between innovation and inclusion, between openness and sovereignty. So at Canada's International Development Research Centre, we have a long-standing support for open, inclusive, and rights-based data ecosystems. And we are proud to be funding the Global Data Barometer and supporting regional research capacity strengthening and supporting international collaboration across borders. So I'd like to highlight that Africa is the most important regional focus in the current report, as I understand. Actually, I got that wrong. IDRC has an initiative called Artificial Intelligence for Development, and it has hubs across the African continent. And it focuses on the regulatory environment, strengthening capacity for artificial intelligence, and promoting context-relevant innovations. So the work with the Global Data Barometer is also linked up with the work that we fund at IDRC for artificial intelligence for development. So the new Global Data Barometer report is being launched today, but I think I've already seen it on the website for the Global Data Barometer, and you'll all look at it today. You can all see it later. And it covers about 40 countries between Latin America and Africa, as I understand. And the researchers that put it together are working within those regions of the world. So what would we like to see with this report? We hope that it will encourage governments to invest in data infrastructure and capacity building. It can also be used by civil society and some of the partners that you, Martha, work with in our Democratic and Inclusive Governance Program to continue to advocate for data transparency, accountability, and inclusion. So I am in my closing remarks now. So we look forward to hearing more about the findings from both Latin America and Africa in this report, but I understand we might be focusing on Africa today, and the scope for change based on the findings. So I'd like to express hope that this report sparks new support for strengthening data practices And I hope we learn more about how an intersectional lens was used in this report, because I haven't read anything about that yet, but look forward to that. I think that the organizers are looking for insights from the participants and observations about how to use these findings, how to continue to socialize them to ensure that they're used to stimulate discussion about policy and practice and actually make a difference. So if you are tweeting, I think one of the organizers might, or Sidney, might type into the chat some of the hashtags you can use, but certainly one you can use is hashtag THE for the, GDB for Global Data Barometer. And you might see other hashtags in the chat. So may each of us learn and be inspired from this launch event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for welcoming us, for these kind words. I think, I mean, it is a good opportunity to also hear, before we are going into the details of the methodology, the partners, and listen from some of our partners about the situation in Africa that we are going to be focusing today. Maybe it's a good opportunity for Muchiri, that is there, the executive director of LDRI, to say a few words about the support that they provided for this report, and then we can go and dive into the methodology and some of the results with our partners there as well here online. I don't know, Muchiri, if you want to say a few words.
I would never pass up the opportunity. Thank you so much, Silvana. Delighted to be here and that we finally made this happen. I think it's been more than 15 years of seeing progress on open data across Africa. When the open data agenda really began to take shape. It was very focused on budget transparency, and I'm delighted that one of the partners who was critical to that journey, IDRC, are still in the room, still supporting this work. So some of the wins that you'll hear about today, in terms of what countries have managed to move to advance on, really is a result of IDRC's investments and the government of Canada. So we are grateful for that. We've kind of mentioned a little bit, I mean, we'll go into details on the methodology, but Kathryn mentioned that a lot of this has been done by country-based researchers. The GDB is not the first attempt to measure data across the world and try to figure out, whether we can figure a trend in terms of growth and progress. But it definitely is, in my view, the most rigorous effort to date. We had the predecessor to GDB was Open Data Barometer. A big part of the Open Data for Development network, which is OD4D, is the predecessor to D4D in IDRC's previous strategies. And that work really helped us understand the value of being able to see where new investments could go, new efforts on advocacy could be, and where we actually need to put more effort on creating an enabling environment from a legislative perspective or from a capacity building civil society side of things. So there are a few areas that you'll hear about today where country researchers were able to capture from their own context, working in their countries, and being able to explain to us, this is what has happened, this is why this has improved, and here's the supporting evidence to show that. So a lot of in fact, just about everything in the GDB, every single data point has a supporting document. There is a verifiable source, and you'll see some of those are areas that we've been working on as a community around Africa for a long time. So budget transparency, you hear about, has seen an improvement, public procurement, areas that have been traditionally difficult for our democracies to make progress on. So even as we begin to put the GDB out, this edition of the Global Data Barometer, I think I want to highlight the opportunity it gives us to put this as a source of evidence within the context of the data policy framework and the work being done at the African Union to advance Africa's data governance. environment, because this is the kind of evidence that our parliamentarians need to see. It's the kind of evidence that our AU ecosystem needs to see, so that when we do eventually do the third edition of GDP, I can tell how Silvana is excited about that prospect. We will also have a continental audience that really understands why this is important now, and they can track back and see the progress they've made. We're at a pivotal moment for the continent now, with the work being done under the AI for Development Africa work, and some of the rest that's being done around figuring out emerging technologies and the risks and the opportunities for that. And I see this nexus of data and emerging technologies as one that presents us on the continent with a massive opportunity, which we are seeing being captured in the emerging strategies on AI. For instance, Kenya and Tanzania, the most recent in my field of sight. But it's also the two places, it's also the nexus that is also presenting us the biggest risk. So even as we move forward with progress on the various areas that we measure in GDP, I'm hoping that countries will take the lessons we're learning and the things that we're observing to begin improving access to information, human rights preserving approach to data protection, and improving transparency in all these areas that we're very keen on as a community and as Africans. So I will stop pontificating now and say thank you so much for the support, IDRC, and all the hard work that's been put into this. Silvana has probably lost a few grams over the year. It is it's a Herculean effort, and they've done a fantastic job. My colleague Kathy is here. She was leading the work around coordinating the research on the continent. So they've done a fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Muchiri, and thank you, Keshi, as well. I mean, she's been key and fundamental for the work, together with Amina as well, the work that we did in Africa, and we're really grateful to all LDRI team as well as IDRC as well. And I'm going to introduce some other people that also supported this work in a few minutes. But first of all, I mean, especially for the people that are going to be watching this video later, I want to provide a few ideas about what it entails. I mean, what we were been doing for the past 2 years. I mean, the things that we were collecting data from. So I give you a really try to be quick snapshot. I'm not usually quick and brief, but I'm going to do my best to present you with some of the general ideas, and then we're going to go and move to a more general conversation about the findings with all the colleagues that we have here. I know it's going to be a little bit tricky to have the online and offline conversation, but we are going to do our best to hear the experience of all of them, because I'm sure they have a lot of things to say about the particular fields of expertise. But without wasting time, I want to share with you. Let me see if is that looking okay. Maybe I need to do this. I hopefully it's okay. Perfect. I mean, okay, wonderful. So basically, I want to show you a little bit about what this edition of the Global Data Barometer entails. I mean, this is the second edition. We've been doing this since 2020. The first edition was released in 2022, and this is the second edition. In a general sense, what we are doing is assessing national data ecosystems and the way in which data is governed, shared, and leveraged for the public good. That's the general aim that we have as a project. Many people here, I mean, some of them are here in this conversation today. We are really grateful for all of them because they provided support in different ways. We have, of course, regional partners like LDRI, ILD as well, and we have also the support of the Caribbean Open Institute. We are going to have a separate conversation focusing on Latin America and the Caribbean, but I want to say thank you for their support and their work in this edition. We had also thematic partners and many are here today with us, and we are going to be listening from them about the findings and the ideas that they got from the data. But in particular, they were really key in helping us, not only in the first edition to develop the indicators, because as you might imagine, we are a small team and we are not experts in every topic. So we needed their expertise and their knowledge to understand which were the right questions to ask in the different countries to better understand the situation of data for the public good. So in that sense, I mean, we had the collaboration of Open Government Partnership, Transparency International, Open Contracting Partnership, Land Portal, Open Ownership, and GIFT. All of them provided their knowledge and their input in not only developing the indicators in the first place, but also adapting and improving the indicators in this second edition. Also, of course, I mean, we are really grateful of the huge support of IDRC, not only in this edition, but in the previous one. That's the reason that we are here today, because of the support they provided, not only to this project, but the whole data ecosystem. We also had the support of the IADB, and we are part also, of course, of the D4D net and ILDA as well. So a few numbers about this edition. We covered 2 years, and in that sense, I mean, we're going to repeat it later, but just to be clear, the data that we gather is from August 2022 to September 2024. So any updates, improvements, or events that were happening since September until now were not covered in this edition. Hopefully in the future it can be covered, but only the events happening until September 2024 are covered in this edition. As I mentioned, thematic partners, 6 regional hubs that were like involved in the coordination of the researcher were ILDA and LDRI. 43 countries were covered in this edition. We gathered information via 27 primary indicators, and we are also using secondary sources, indicators coming from other international organizations that provide us with valuable information to have a better picture of each of the ecosystems in the countries that we cover. 422 primary variables, more than 30,000 data points collected. So in a nutshell, that's some of the numbers that we manage in this second edition. Once again, our geographical scope in this edition, as you can see, Latin America and the Caribbean and some parts of Africa, and we are hoping to get more countries from Africa in particular in future editions. Some of the main things that I'd like to clarify and comment on this edition and the methodology. We usually say that we are not a ranking, we are a rating. I mean, we don't care about positions and who is number 1 and who is number 40, because we think what is important is for each country to learn from their own experiences and to be able to find the gaps or the things that they have improved. I mean, and being able to work in their own ecosystem and I understand what's the situation there. So that's the reason that we are saying it's more a rating than a ranking. And the scale is 0 to 100. And even though in some cases, probably if you go to the results on the website, you're going to see some numbers that are not that low. We did the experiment and we elaborate or develop an imaginary country with the best scores that are happening today. And the overall score for that imaginary country is 87. So attaining high scores is possible today. There's a lot of room for improvement everywhere, but it's possible to do it. So in a sense, also I want to highlight the idea that all the research was carried out through in-country researchers, as Muchiri was mentioning. So there was one researcher in each of the countries that was coordinated by the regional coordinators. And also we have a team of external reviewers apart from the thematic partners that provided support in that stage. And of course, all the data, I mean, we are talking about data and open data in particular, all the data, all the responses and all the scores, they are all publicly available in our website. We have notes on the methodology, on the scoring process and the responses. So anybody that wants to go there and do their own exercise and try to replicate everything, they can do it. Just a few more clarifications, as I mentioned before, 2 years, August 2022, September 2024, that's the period that we were studying in the second edition. The survey was developed in collaboration with all our thematic partners, as I mentioned before. They were key and instrumentals, not only in the first edition to develop the indicators from scratch, but also in the second edition to be able to improve and remove or add indicators depending on the results and the lessons that we learned from the first edition. All the indicators are defined under 3 pillars that are governance, capability, and availability. Governance in a more traditional sense, as we are looking at legislation, policy, regulations. Capabilities, the teams, the agencies, the skills, the infrastructure behind the data and the regulations, and of course, the availability of the data in different thematic areas. So that's what we are looking at through different areas. In a nutshell, that's a little bit about what the structure of the survey is. I mean, we are talking about clusters that are big groupings of indicators in different areas. We have, for example, 2 core clusters that are governance foundations and critical competencies, looking at the whole spectrum of legislations and capability in a particular country. And then we have thematic clusters like political integrity, land management, company information, public procurement, public finance, and equitable access. I mean, all of them are paired with a thematic expert organization. Those are divided into action areas that are smaller pieces of topics that are included as well to have a more detailed information about some of these areas. Then below that, we have indicators, and inside indicators, sub-questions and supporting questions. Just a quick clarification, and probably Tom is going to talk about that later, but land management, that particular cluster, we did in partnership with Land Portal, and in that sense, the data that it was gathered for that particular cluster was gathered by Land Portal because they are developing their own land-focused index after the experience of the first edition of the barometer. And just to get closer to the end and start the conversation with the partners, other thing that we included in this edition is the cross-cutting themes, because we understand that not all the topics and not all the important topics that we need to learn from are gathered by indicators, but they are through all the elements across the barometer structure. So there are things or small elements that we gather through all the indicators, in particular about 3 topics. One is data foundation for AI. We have several questions inside the survey trying to capture this topic, inclusion, and in particular, we gather information in terms of people with different capacities and also about different languages coverage. And lastly, use of data. I mean, we changed in a way the methodology in the way we approach the use of data from the first edition to the second edition. And in that sense, now we are looking more at the examples and to learn from them and understand what are the trends in that sense that we gather from that information. In particular, we are looking at the qualitative information that we gather throughout the whole survey. Some general key takeaways that we gather. I mean, I'm not going to go into the specific because that's what we are going to talk with the different people here, the different speakers. We can see that in general, frameworks are expanding, but it requires a stronger implementation. I mean, something that we need to work on is this implementation of the different frameworks. Also, we see, and probably it's not new, but we see that with evidence that data skills and competencies are key to unlocking impact. Also, that AI readiness is emerging, but we still need to build coherent and inclusive strategies to make it happen. Also, open data is at a crossroads. I mean, we are seeing in many cases a strong initiative, but we are also seeing the other side of the coin. That is, in some places, teams and initiatives are lacking support. Inclusion in data. requires deeper integration beyond commitment. We see in many cases legislations and guidelines that had a lot of commitment, but as I mentioned before with the frameworks, we need to take one extra step to work on the implementation. Interoperability, in terms in particular about political integrity datasets, is still a pending issue and is something that we need to work on. And in general, about the regions, in Latin America and the Caribbean, there's a strong institutional capacity, but there's limited cross-agency coordination and collaboration. And in Africa, we see significant progress, but there's still ongoing challenges with implementation. As we can see, there's kind of a key message there that it's not only important to have the right frameworks, but we need the capabilities, the skills for the implementation to happen, to create the impact that we desire. So I'm going to stop here with a kind of the general overview of the barometer. Hopefully it didn't took too long, I'm not sure. But what I'd like to do right now is to start talking with the people that help, with the people that help develop this edition, and they can talk about the different fields, the regional or the thematic areas, so they can tell us a little bit what they found with the information that we gathered. So in that sense, I'm gonna introduce people online and offline. In that sense, we have in the room there with you, Christine Wachira from Open Ownership. Thank you so much for all your help, and your support today was key also for this to happen. Edwin Muhumuza from Open Contracting Partnership, Renzo Falla from Open Government Partnership, Charl-Thom Bayer from Land Portal, and of course we have there Muchiri Nyaggah from Local Development Research Institute. The idea today is that we can talk with everybody. And first of all, I will start asking each of you, each participant, and maybe we can go in that order, start with Christine and follow that order, to tell us a little bit in 3-4 minutes about your own observations, about the findings in your area of expertise, about the data that we collected in this edition. Christine, if you'd like to start there in the office, it would be a pleasure to listen to your findings.
Thank you very much, Silvana. And I honestly cannot take all the credit. My colleagues who are not here, based in London, Alana, and a few others, have really worked tremendously hard towards the successful report that we now have. So my name is Christine Wachira. For those who do not know me, I work with Open Ownership. At Open Ownership, we work towards supporting governments to ensure the use of beneficial ownership data, and this is towards supporting their tackling corruption, the revenue collection, or even just helping in promoting investment climate in the countries that we are working in. In Africa, we work in about 13 to 15 countries. And yeah, so I will delve into the question that you asked in terms of the findings. And I want to first start on just congratulating you again, Silvana, for the work that you have done. They focus on company information and particularly beneficial ownership, transparency. I will probably reference to it as BOT, and has been tremendously useful. And it really speaks to the trends and gaps we have seen as we implement regionally. And as the report highlights, many African countries continue to face challenges in operationalizing beneficial ownership reports. And I think you've mentioned it in your key highlights, that yes, there's progress that's happening. And we did see that even the report states that there are a lot of legal reforms that have taken place over the last few years regarding BO. However, beyond the reforms, how are these nations operationalizing this data? How are they using this data? And recently the UN said that Africa is losing $88.6 billion annually, which means that as much as that on paper we are doing good and there is progress that we can indicate, that this data is not actually being used in a way that can curb illicit financial flows. And so I think the data that is indicated in the report does a good job at asking some critical questions, allowing us as implementers to ask some critical questions, even with the government agencies that we are working with. Are the laws effective? Are we operationalizing them? In the report, it states that 7% of the countries that are studied, only 7% actually had public beneficial ownership data. Again, speaking to the need for going beyond reforms to actually being practical in the work that we are doing. So in other words, data without use is data without impact. And I like the report because it's a grounding tool in that sense, because it does give us leverage to actually say, yes, you're making progress. When you walk into a government agency and they say, we have a register now, we can come back and ask them, but then how are you using this data to help in your public procurement processes? And if this data is not available for civil society organizations or the public, how are we keeping you accountable as the procuring entities in your countries? In conclusion, I think the report gives us a good implementation challenge. It offers us a mindset shift from focus from just adopting PO reforms, which on paper, which are great and which I think is commendable, and the support should continue for countries to do this, to ensure that these reforms are operationalized, that they are integrated into institutional workflows and accessible to key stakeholders. So beyond even the competent authorities in these nations and the law enforcement agencies, that we also have journalists who can access this information, civil society, and the public at large. I will pause there in terms of my findings, but thank you very much again, Silvana, for the opportunity, even for open ownership, to be able to contribute to this study.
Thank you so much, Christine. And again, I mean, the support of open ownership has been key, and your support there today was also key for this to happen. And you say many things that are really important and that we see through different topics, not only about beneficial ownership, but it's the idea about implementation and the focus on that, but also the use and the way that we can connect one data set or one topic to the other. And we are seeing a lack of interoperability in many cases, in particular when we are talking about this type of data sets. And you talk about procurement. And in that sense, we have here people that are coming from Open Contracting Partnership, Edwin Muhumuza. We also have, I think, together in the room, Jörg Newman, both from Open Contracting Partnership. They were also really important in the support that we have for this particular topic. In many cases, we've seen that many countries are doing pretty good in terms of procurement, but there's also I mean, we need to look a little bit closer to find the gaps, and I'm sure Edwin can tell us a little bit about the findings, in particular in Africa, in the contracting area. Edwin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me add my voice to those who have spoken before me to thank you and the researchers for an incredible job. Doing this regularly is very helpful to just check how globally the public data, the situation with public data, as you already noted at the beginning, data is extremely important as a public good, because it helps measure what's working, what's not working, and therefore what reforms need to be done. And if there's no data, countries are flying blind. And yeah, certain aspects of the public sector, or for that matter, government, that have advanced in terms of the quality of data. The obvious one are like economic indicators around budgets or taxes, which are a little easier to collect. I think the challenge has always been in these others like public procurement and beneficial ownership transparency, which we now know are the wheels that make the transition between very good budgets and actual service delivery. So if you do not work on the total ecosystem of public data, then you struggle there. Yes, as open contracting partnership, a global nonprofit that supports procurement reform around the world with particular emphasis on good quality data and public procurement as the anchor of wider reforms. We definitely very pleased to note that this particular report, one of the most the areas where we had the most data was around public procurement. Of course, this is encouraging. It's not always the case, and encouraging because public procurement has sometimes not taken the importance that it deserves. As we now all know, about 15% of global GDP is expended through public procurement. And in Africa, it gets even higher, in some cases up to 70% or 60% of budgets within the African countries being expended through public procurement. So it's a welcome development that this year it accounts for most of the data that was gotten. Yeah, some of the nice results show that at least 41 of the 43 countries in Africa and Latin America had some form of procurement data that's being published. Of course, about only half of those have it in a machine-readable format. Yeah, it's progress on quantity, but maybe something still to do around quality. And why is that important? When you have machine-readable data, it makes it easier to manipulate in a positive sense, to analyze, but also allow different stakeholders to be able to look at it and achieve the kind of things that Christian was saying a little earlier, that data serves a wider purpose. You need to check whether the reforms you're implementing in inclusive procurement, in accountability, transparency, and efficiency actually being achieved. Countries like Kenya and Nigeria scored highly around availability of the data, and these moved a little earlier. Again, as you noted, in Africa, there's very strong policy and legal framework in place, which I always say is the easier bit. The challenge is the implementation gap between what the policy and legal framework espouses and what is actually being done. So investing in enforcement, but also and maybe sometimes I don't want to use the word enforcement, but in any case, yeah, enforcement and compliance is extremely important for us to move a step further, celebrating the steps that have been taken, but also recognizing the many steps that need to be taken to achieve where we want to go. And again, Africa compared to, let's say, Latin America, when it comes to procurement data, showed that only a quarter of those countries assessed have machine-readable data compared to Latin America, which is almost 2/3 or 68%. So we need to emulate these other different regions on what they've done right. That's some of the work we've been doing with a lot of the partners in the region. In fact, all these that I've mentioned, Kenya, South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, we've been doing some work there, and good to see that some of these efforts, especially making sure that there's the open contracting data standard on their procurement platforms, is yielding these results. So for the next steps, which is what maybe reports like these should help us do, we need to improve on the quantitative element. That the data that's being published is usable, is accessible, and also in a format that can be used for the wider purposes, as I already noted earlier, for wider procurement reform. We are seeing good and interesting developments around procurement reform transitioning into higher purposes than just efficiency and effectiveness. There's the inclusive agenda to use the public procurement system to promote women-owned businesses, small and medium enterprises, youth and people with disabilities in countries like Kenya with the AGPO policy and law. The challenge there has been the lack of gender disaggregated data, or for that matter, data disaggregated in those categories to be able to check whether they are doing fine or where they need to address certain concerns. So that's, I think, going forward, some of the investment that need to be done. We are in a way in conversations with some of them, and I think we will partner with a number of you to just make sure this goes ahead. It's difficult to collect good data if you do not automate these systems. So one of the challenges and why public procurement has always lagged behind is the manual systems. We need to encourage the growing revolution for e-procurement in the African region, and to make sure that these e-procurement systems are end-to-end, so they capture the whole procurement cycle, and that will also mean integrating with other systems like the beneficial ownership transparency systems, the payment systems, the budget systems, and planning systems, including the contract management systems. One of the deficiencies we note from the report is that much as the public procurement data has improved, it is still just largely around tender information and contract award information. But we know that it's a lot wider than that, and that can only happen when you automate the systems and integrate them with these different systems. So that's something that is important going forward. And then defining use cases, red flags being embedded. Now there's artificial intelligence that is opening up all sorts of opportunities for large data sets, so like around public procurement, which can then help address the use cases that Krishna was talking about: anti-corruption, inclusivity, sustainability around green and wider sustainable procurement elements. So we see huge opportunities there. We celebrate the strides so far achieved. The report shows there are still gaps, but we look at them as opportunities that need to be addressed. But next time we have this report, we have progressed further than we've done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Edwin. And yes, definitely a lot of progress has been made in the procurement area, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. And thank you again for the next steps, the gaps that are still there and needs to be filled. So it's good to know about that as well. We have still two other partners to listen from. I'm gonna go in that sense. I mean, we have in the list of the persons that I was talking before. One of our partners from the beginning is Open Government Partnership. So in that sense, we have here today Renzo, that has been Renzo Falla from OGP, that has been instrumental, not only, I mean, in terms of the support as a critical thematic partner, but also in helping us making the data and the way that we present things more accessible. They've been doing for the first edition, the Broken Links report, that was really useful to transmit and to share with a broader audience all the findings that we have in the first edition. Renzo, I don't know if you want to talk to us a little bit about the findings that you have in this second edition. Are you there? If not, I can follow with Tommy. If you have any connection problems, yes, don't worry. We can go to you later. Tommy from Land Portal, is here with us. As I mentioned before, Land Portal not only provided their expertise in terms of helping us developing the indicators and reframing them, but also they gathered data for most of the countries in this second edition because they are also building their own index focus deeper in land data. So, Tommy, if you can tell us a little bit about the findings that you could find with the data that coming from this second edition.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Some of what I'm going to say has been touched on, but in the sort of land management sector, one of the key findings, I think, is that data governance frameworks at the country level are missing or lagging behind implementation, but we've seen a huge improvement in ATI laws and data protection laws. So at the national level, the statutory frameworks are there. And in addition, we see a very strong positive correlation between countries and the number of years for which they have ATI legislation and how they are performing in this index. So the countries that have had more years with legislation, even if the legislation isn't of the best quality, they tend to have more open data. And I think this is a very important finding because it's a very positive step to say, yes, drafted legislation, make data open and accessible, and the situation does improve. Unfortunately, not enough. Where we see the gap are really at the operational level to have data sharing, rules, regulations between organizations. So ministries are producing data, but the ministry responsible for planning or for agriculture does not have a meaningful way to access the data because they're using different standards, they're using different systems. So the policy and regulatory framework has really improved a lot, and that is shown by increased openness, but there are still serious challenges with operational data sharing agreements, using of standards, common standards, making data interoperable. So some of this has been mentioned, but I think it's important to reflect that this also applies to the land sector. The second key finding, and so there are many key findings, I'm not going to go into all of them, but the second key finding is that land tenure data is generally not that available. Only about 30% of the countries have some land tenure data available. However, and I think this is a very interesting question, when it comes to tenure rights, data on mining concessions and natural resource rights are quite well documented. About 80% of the countries had some or fairly complete mining and natural resource data. And I think that raises an important question. Why is the mining sector documenting mining rights, mining concessions so well? For example, I mean, it could be the work that the EITI is doing, the extractive industries. So these are also initiatives that are driving data openness in particular sectors. And I think this is important because it does show that if concentrated effort is put around an area for data, it can happen very quickly, even in countries that are generally considered to have low capabilities when it comes to data. Because when we look at the capabilities of data, they might be in one sector of government. Sometimes you've got very good statistical officers and statistical systems, but that same technology and level of skill and data readiness doesn't exist in the Ministry of Lands or other government ministries. So capacity is quite fragmented. But I think this is important to reflect on why that particular subset of tenure data is so available. When we compare it, for example, to state land and we compare it to indigenous land rights, the opposite picture emerges. Only about 20% of countries have some level of data on state land and on indigenous land. So these are some of the things that we can reflect on. The last finding for me, which was very interesting, is that land tenure data and land use data, even though not a lot of it was available, but when it was available, it was largely freely available, free of charge. And I think this is very important because about a decade ago, not everybody, but there was still a lot of discussion from government side on sort of a cost recovery model for selling data and the value of data. And the value of data was seen in terms of sort of a priced commodity that you could sell. That conversation has changed now, and people realize that the value of data is not data itself as the commodity, but the services, the value that you can leverage from the data, the use that is made of data. So that the data is put to a service, and that service is what is valuable. Where do we need to build hospitals? Where do we need to build clinics? That information, the service, the access to water, that is actually valuable. And so this points us in that direction. So we find that 71% of land tenure data and 100% of the land use data we discovered is free. And I think this is fantastic. The downside, though, of all of this is that where the data is available, it's free, it is still very incomplete. 0 countries were classified as having full historic data available, and only about 11% of countries comply with machine readable data principles or with open licensing principles. So what we are finding is that yes, data is available, it's free, and that is a good step already, that's progress. But that data, to become usable, to become valuable in improving service provision, now needs to be made more machine readable. So this is where the sort of technical part of the standards implementation, the sharing frameworks really becomes very important. So I'm just going to end with the fact that these results in general indicate quite a lot of variation nationally and regionally. The ecosystem is still quite incomplete. There are also more dimensions to land data than we are currently measuring, and more needs to be done to improve not only data collection, but how governments make data open and publish on existing platforms and on existing collections, because many of the platforms already exist. So we have somewhat infrastructure already available for improving the data. I don't know, I have some comments on the application and impact, but I'm assuming that is for the next round.
Yes, wait a little bit on that. Don't lose the thoughts. We are gonna go to OGP and a few reflections from Muchiri and Keshia from LDRI, and then I'm just letting you know so you have that in mind. I'm going to ask each of you, so keep that in mind. A couple of sentences, not more, because we don't have a lot of time, about what to do next, what future plans needs to be covered. So think about that while we go to Renzo Falla, now yes, connected from OGP, that can tell us a little bit about the data coming from the political integrity module. Renzo, all yours. We are not listening. We can't hear you. Okay. Yes, today is not the day to listen or to hear from Renzo, I guess. We can go to Muchiri to see if he has and Keshia that is there as well, if he has a few reflections on the general region. I mean, he already covered some ideas, if he has something to add, while we see if Renzo we can hear him. If not, I mean, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to hear from him. But I don't know, Muchiri or Keshia, if you have something to add to the regional situation that you want to add to this conversation.
Yeah, Keshia.
Okay, thank you, Silvana, and the panel team. A lot has been said. I mean, just from open ownership, land portal, all of these discussions are just running through my mind, and I'm like we've said everything on what I was about to say. But I mean, just to appreciate, I mean, in the region, the data landscape across Africa right now is undergoing quite a transformational shift, shaped by the social political change, digital innovation, growth, growing civic demand for transparency, which is currently happening as if you've been watching the news in Africa lately. So there's a lot of movements in these areas. So there has been a notable uptick in the adaptation of legal and institutional frameworks to manage public data responsibly. In the previous barometer and this second edition, at least we've seen some great improvements based on the previous edition. At the same time, also seeing countries and some of these governments and also the non-state sectors that are leveraging technology, and also some who are leveraging AI to improve data collection, accessibility, and also engaging the citizens within these regions. Just not to repeat myself from what panelists have said, if you just get time to look at the report, some of the key trends that you'll be able to see and some great improvements that we can shine on, not ignoring the gaps that we have. I mean, there's some great improvement within public procurement, data protection. You see most of these countries have increased data protection laws. We have also a tremendous improvement in also the budget and spending and transparency data. So these trends are showing us growing awareness among African governments. They're seeing the value in this data, and which is great, especially in fostering trust and accountability within the region. Aside from that, maybe I'll just go. I'll just mention some of what my colleagues have mentioned. Looking at the gaps, of course, we cannot ignore that. I mean, we've had issues of political integrity, land management, where we're not seeing some of these regulations, issues in lobbying, transparency, and language, where there are actually no regulations at all. But looking at political finance, interest and asset declaration, and I think, yes, beneficial ownership. There are regulations, but we still have a lot of work to do in implementing these regulations and a lot of operationalization. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I don't know if Muchiri has something to add.
No.
Yeah.
Wow, that's the first. I mean, Muchiri has nothing to add now. I'm just kidding, but thank you so much, Kesia, for your work as well, not only the findings and all the support of LDRI. I'm not sure if we can hear Renzo or we just skip it and not keep trying. I'm not sure, Renzo, what do you say? Okay, so don't worry. I mean, in different ways, we've been touching different topics related to political integrity, in a sense. I mean, through other areas, and also what Muchiri and Kesia mentioned about the situation in Africa. What I can ask now to all the participants and the people that are here that we listen from is to tell us in a few words, because we don't want to run too long, about future plans or next steps, or what are the gaps or the places where we need to work the most in terms of the African region. I don't know if we should start again with the same logic. Probably Edwin, that I know you need to leave soon, if you want to say a few words, or Georg.
Silvana, because people have been listening for quite some time, can you, even if we don't answer them, before we go into the next session, would you allow, we have someone next to me who's not spoken yet, I don't know if you're speaking later, there's a woman who's visited who might want to introduce herself. Would you take just 3 questions, even if you don't answer them? Just take 3 questions so that we take a break from listening, and then we'll go into the next session. Would that be okay?
Perfect.
Thank you. Well, we have a question right here in the room. Oh, we don't. Martha has a question in the room. Okay. And Gladys. Anybody else? We have 3 questions in the room. Wonderful.
So thank you so much to the presenters for sharing your perspective. I was wondering, is the calls for open data, taking shape, and also countries are taking it? Are we also discussing about the data protection, data privacy, so the ethical and responsible use of data, even if we want the data to be private? What support or what kind of mechanism currently exists to ensure that the data is protected, and also there's no collusion between state and capital in terms of selling data or pushing it to the other bidder? We've seen, for example, mobile companies, when they collect people's information, then you start receiving maybe unsolicited adverts and things like that. Then my second question is the issue you mentioned. I think in Africa there's the African Data Policy Framework. Are countries mandated to report to the African Union in terms of their advances and also the challenges that they are facing in terms of facilitating open data, whether it's on procurement or on land data? Do they report on progress? How do we even track that progress, apart from the initiatives that the Global Data Barometer is doing? But do we also have like government-led or Rex-led initiative where we promote accountability at the national level, then filter into the regional level, into the continental level?
Yeah, I think, thank you for the presentations. I think my question is around data availability. From what has been presented, seems to be quite low in Africa, even when you visit the portal and now you interrogate what is available. It seems to be limited in Africa. There's a question of, if you look across the assessed indicators, are there any constraints to having the data available? What's necessary to bring in more countries, more data? Is it an issue of frameworks and more data accessibility? It's a question of gaps, and what do you see as the trends going forward in terms of both regions? Is there any work around comparison of these trends, or what is all the requirements that would be necessary to make this the data availability issue perhaps better addressed going forward as we look to version 3.0, as Muchiri has alluded? Thank you.
And maybe introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, I'm James Kenya from Transparency International Kenya, and Mark, right?
Yes.
Gladys. I can say you've taken words out of my mouth. My concern actually was on the governance bit, whereby you talked about data integrity. And because, like in Kenya, we have an Access to Information Act that has never been fully enacted. And in relating that to BO, we have the BRS, Business Registration Service here in Kenya, that has actually never made the BO register public. And so that becomes a challenge, because we also know they are technically, I don't want to say incompetent. They don't have the capacity to even verify the accuracy of the data that's there. So I don't want to water down what you've said, but my question revolved about data integrity and accessibility. Yeah.
Yes. Introduce yourself.
Yes. Hello, my name is Grace Naisarian. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I work with an organization known as the Land Trust. So one of the key takeaways that you mentioned was on AI readiness is emerging, but we need to build inclusive strategies. So I will tie my question to public participation. And with that, we know that AI has been transformative in the political and legal sphere. And my question is, how do we ensure that AI does not infringe upon the tenets of democracy? Yeah.
Thanks, Silvana, for that democratic intrusion. And I think it sets you up well for the next phase where you wanted to talk about the future anyway. So back to you in case there were any questions online you needed to take as well before you continue. This is fascinating.
It was really useful to listen to the questions. In some cases, again, Renzo is here again. I'm not sure if we should try one last time or not, because some of the topics that were mentioned there Oh, yeah. They are in the floor were related to political integrity. In some cases, some of the questions. So maybe some things could be covered by Renzo and the OGP overview of the situation. In terms of just to say something very briefly about data protection and privacy, I just want to say that we cover one of our indicators is data protection legislation that it was mentioned several times in this conversation. And in that sense, we've seen a progress in Africa, in the different countries in that area. We've seen a progress in terms of enactment of legislation. We still need to see that same progress in the implementation and enforcement of those legislation. So there's a lot of progress there, but there's still room to cover in terms of implementation. But we've seen a difference between the first edition and the second edition in terms of the number of legislations that are around that topic. But I don't want to take much time. Renzo, if you want to say a few words now that we can hear you.
Thanks, Silvana, and thanks everyone for your patience. Finally. Yeah, so I'm Renzo from OGP, from the Open Government Partnership, where governments and civil society work together to make open government reforms. And very much the issues of data privacy, data verification and integrity are key challenges that we're facing and that I can speak about. I think the first thing I want to say, though, is something that Muchiri mentioned at the beginning, which is important to remember that the Global Data Barometer is the most granular cross-country data set on many of these issues, including political integrity. So this is not just about whether the frameworks exist, whether there are data sets available. It's also if this specific information that is essential for governments to be held accountable is usable by people. So not just who is lobbying the government, but how much money are they contributing, not just to the revenue and expenses of political parties, but also who is donating to those political parties. So this is really very exciting development with the Global Data Barometer and this new launch, because this is information at a level of detail that we simply don't have in other spaces. So to the questions on data availability and accessibility, I think when it comes to political integrity, I think there's 3 points to mention. One is that there is generally not data available. This is not just in the region, but also around the world. It's one of the lowest scoring areas of the GDP. There's only a handful of countries that publish data on the assets of senior officials, finances of political parties, or information about lobbyists. That's the first finding. But the second one is that the GDP gives us a clear sense of why, or the next steps that each country has to take. So, for example, in the case of lobbying, there are simply no frameworks that even define who is a lobbyist, what counts as a lobbyist. And so to expect that there's governments are going to be publishing information about people engaging in these activities is simply not realistic. So there, it's a matter of the frameworks. But in a different area, for example, in asset declarations, there are a lot of frameworks that require senior officials to submit their assets, but very few countries require that the information be made publicly available. And this gets actually to the point about the data privacy, that there are several countries where it is actually by law not allowed to be made public. So for example, in Cote d'Ivoire, they have an OGP commitment to make asset declarations publicly available, but they're starting just with the statistics on who is publishing and who is not, because the information contained in the declarations is currently not allowed to be made publicly available. So there has to be a balance there. There has to be frameworks that clearly define the information that can or cannot be collected and the information that can and cannot be disclosed, and to whom, whether it's oversight bodies or publicly available to journalists, media, civil society organizations. The last finding I wanted to mention, which is really important because it's, I think, a clear, it's good news, and others have mentioned it already, that the direction of travel is entirely positive. So if we look at the first edition of the GDB, compare it to the second, we do see new countries that have established frameworks. We do see new data sets on issues of political integrity, among other areas of the GDB. And this matches with what we're seeing, the reforms that we're seeing. For example, in OGP, we're seeing Senegal implementing new requirements around asset declarations. We're seeing Malawi setting up a registrar of political parties that will be in charge of managing the political finance reports. So the direction of travel, it's perhaps the progress is not as quick as we would want to see it, but we're seeing progress around the region, around OGP countries, also in other regions. So I think the remaining challenges are how we turn that data to action. So I think, Silvana, if I may, I'll just mention a few of the points on the last question you had, which is that the data alone is not enough. You need networks of people and institutions working together. There was the question around the data verification. So if the data is not being checked, then how much use is it? And that's where I think we need groups of people, oversight institutions, we need journalists, we need investigative journalists, civil society organizations working together to make use of this information and to make sure that it is usable. I think that's where platforms like OGP come in, that bring different groups to the table and can help to drive these reforms. And ultimately, we need political commitment to do that, right? That's something that is essential here. I'll just mention to close that at OGP, we've launched the OpenGov Challenge, where institutions from any level of government, any branch of government can commit to these reforms, including in political integrity. And already dozens of governments are joining this call. And this is where the GDB data can help, right? We're planning to use the data to track progress. Who is making improvements? Who is not? Where are there still gaps? How can we tailor our support and our guidance to match the areas that the GDB has identified as key areas that require more improvements? So I think a lot of work to do, but coalitions and political commitment will get us there, and the GDB data is an essential tool to help in that respect. Thanks. Silvana, back to you.
Thank you, Renzo. And I'm really happy that we made it possible to listen to your points. I mean, it took a while, but it happened. Just to get into the end, because I know that people probably has other commitments. Some people, I know that, for example, Edwin needed to leave earlier. Just if you can, 1 or 2 sentences at the most from each of the speakers about future next steps, things that we need to do or address that you want to highlight. I don't know if we can start with Christine. I mean, doing the whole round again. I mean, if you want to say a couple of sentences, very short, what you're looking towards the future.
Okay. Thank you very much, Silvana. I will try to be as brief as possible. I would say the first part in terms of future and use of the insights that have been provided here is ensuring that the work that we're doing is going beyond legal reforms and company registers to actual use, effective use of beneficial ownership data. And so working with government agencies to ensure that, yes, they are not just collecting this data, but it is being effectively being used. Secondly, I think the data provides a case for global and regional collaboration. Just last month at Open Ownership, we had the privilege to be at the AU STC meeting, a specialized technical committee on illicit financial flows and tax. And at that meeting, we were able to have member countries contribute. And one of the things that they were asking for is data that shows how regional collaboration across, how sharing data across is beneficial. And so I think insights from this, now we can use this as a tool. We can use this to leverage that, hey, we need to collaborate regionally, maybe as an East Africa community, or even just across the entire African region. And finally, in the turbulent times that we're in development funding, where it's dwindling by the day, I think the insights here give us a basis to talk to donors regarding the work that we're doing and tell them this is what these are the results that have been achieved. This is where we want to go. And there is clearly a gap here. And so I'd say those 3 points for now. I have a few more insight, but I'll let my other colleagues also chip in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. I don't know, Georg, if you want to add something. First of all, thank you for being here and also filling the gap for Edwin. I'm really happy to have you here. I don't know if you have a few comments in terms of what's coming next.
Thank you, Silvana. And yeah, Edwin had to leave, so I'm jumping in here quickly. I think there's similarly a couple of key points that we're seeing in terms of positive development that we would hope to continue, which is really around making sure that legislation is implemented into active, concrete and actionable implementation guidance. We see that working quite well when data publication and kind of like use of e-procurement system and digitalization is made mandatory, such as in Tanzania, which was not covered here, but which has shown that this is actually possible. So mandatory use of e-procurement systems, and with that, the data requirements and data publishing requirements as well. So that is one. I think we are at a point where we start seeing a more local ownership of digital systems in Africa. We've seen that in Rwanda, which has come out in the top. We're seeing that in Uganda as well. And with that local ownership, we see local use as well, like by the procurement agencies themselves. And that we think is a really strong vending point for governments themselves using it, improving the data, and then engaging with civil society and other partners as well around monitoring and accountability of that data. So we hope that this combination of stronger legislation mandating use, more internal local ownership of the data itself can really move forward. And I mean, as I think you've seen in the data, is there's a lot of talk about AI readiness and quality of information on AI. And I think we see that procurement as one of the core ways government is spending money. It's going to be one of the areas where we see a lot of impact on that as well. So that will have to drive some of that development as well. So I think we're hopeful that we see actually this trend of kind of like stronger digitization, stronger data publishing continuing, particularly for the procurement framework, despite a very challenging overarching environment. But yeah, thank you for those comments, and over to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know, Tommy, if you have a few words to say about the future directions or the gaps. Very briefly, please, because we are running out of time.
Okay, very quickly. One of the issues that I think we're going to be looking at going forward is the issue around data fragmentation and how that hinders innovation and use. So we're already seeing there's more and more data coming online, and I think that conversation is changing to how we can improve the reuse of data within government departments and between government departments. I think another thing that we found is that land use data is needed, and it does have an impact. And we are thinking of ways of how to document and amplify that impact. So there are studies from Burkina Faso, from Honduras, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, that have shown how open and free data is used to, for example, detect rates of deforestation at national level or at regional level. So open data is being used, does have an impact. Advocacy groups are using the data, but I think it's also important for us to do more to document those cases and to publicize and share them. Other work that we are doing going forward is to look at the openness of data, land data, and we are mapping the SOLI index, which is also the GDB, against the perception of corruption, the CPI index. And we have found some very interesting results with a whole number of countries sitting in the quadrant with very low data openness and very high levels of perceived corruption. There are a couple of countries like Botswana, Costa Rica, that exceed expectations, where there is very low data openness, but also very low levels of corruption. But those were only, I think, 5 countries out of 43 that exhibited that characteristic. The rest of the countries were in this low data openness, high perceived levels of corruption sector. And this is something that we want to unpack a bit more. But once again, it's to use it as a yardstick. And then the last point, we have seen organizations that are responsible for value chain management and verification of value chain for products, agricultural products from Africa to the EU, that are increasingly starting to look at the ways that they can use this data to make trust estimates or to do sort of risk assessments about whether they will be able to verify these value chains. So that's an important emerging use. And then we've also seen companies, commercial companies, mapping companies using this data to provide services to governments around, digitizing land administration functions and services. I think that's the important. The question is going to start shifting from the data to the services that the data enables. And that's a conversation that I think is going to be very interesting.
Thank you so much, Tommy. And again, I would love to keep talking about this because I think there are many things to unpack, but I'm very mindful of the people here and they are in Nairobi, that they have different commitments. So before giving the floor to the office there in Nairobi, to LDRI and Muchiri and Kathryn, I'm really grateful for all the things that you've done and help us have this conversation. I want to give the floor to Sidney Leclercq, that is a senior officer from IDRC. I don't know, Sidney, if you want to say a few words just to close this meeting.
Yes, thanks so much, Silvana, and I really want to thank and congratulate the GDB team and the LDRI team for the incredible work and dedication on this Global Data Barometer, and thanks also to Open Ownership, OCP, OGP, and Land Portal speakers for sharing their great insights and thoughts during this discussion, and also for their contribution and support to the GDP. So, and I also want to thank really warmly the IDRC colleagues in our South Regional Office for hosting us this discussion today. In IDRC, we often talk about the evidence-based policy-making potential of the research that we support. And I really think the GDP is the very definition of that potential. Because the GDP is not just a report, it's not just a tool. It's kind of both kind of a mirror and a map. It reflects where we are, and it kind of helps us navigate where we need to go. And I think it's at the beginning of the report, it says data is increasingly central to how governments, businesses, and civil society operates, but the benefits of data are not evenly distributed. And I think that's what really matters, and that the GDP challenges us to ask who has access to data, who benefits from it, and who is left behind. And we know that in a time really of digital transformation, in a time of AI that we are growingly relying on, the way that we govern and use data will shape the very future of our societies. And so the GDP is really reminding us that data must not be governed only efficiently. It's important, but it's not only, but also ethically and inclusively. So it's a reminder, but very much an empower, if I can say that, or an empowering agent, because it equips us with the evidence to act. It helps government identify the gaps and civil society to advocate for change and researchers to build solutions. And I really also one of the phrase from the reports, inclusion is often referenced in policy documents, but rarely operationalized in practice. Well, I also think that the barometer offers us that path to action. So we really hope that this work will be used to influence national strategy, regional dialogues, as it all greatly did in the first edition, and that it will be used as a tool for accountability and collaboration. And so I really wanted to thank you for being the face of that collaboration today. And at IDRC, we've been really proud to support this work, which is critical to building a more just, a more inclusive and data-driven future. And today for Africa, does the Africa launch today. So let's keep the momentum going and the impact flowing from that work. And again, thank you for taking the time, and thank you again to the colleagues in our SR office for hosting us so greatly today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sidney. And before just giving the floor to the people there in the office in Nairobi, I just want to say a few things about what's coming. If people are watching this afterwards and they are getting till the end, first of all, thank you. And also telling them that we are going to have the Latin American launch next month in Abre Latam con Datos in July. So more information coming in our social media accounts. And also we are going to keep having discussions with our partners. And also if you are a government official, a government member, those there in the office or listening outside of this conversation and want to talk about the results, please send us a message and we are happy to do that. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to leave the room to say the final words to Muchiri and Kathryn there in Nairobi. And once again, thank you so much for all your support.
I have nothing to say. You have the last words. And then we close.
Oh, this is so tempting. I can't give it up. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Kathryn, the IDRC team for supporting this on the in-person side. And I just want to say we say if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. What I'm seeing, even with this GDB work, was partnerships coming together to help move this. And I think it's going to go far. The work that we're doing with OGP and our Mzalendo Trust is the civil society co-convener for OGP in Kenya. It allows us to see how these things are making connections in the way of beneficial ownership as a big area that the government of Kenya has been working on. In other countries, it will probably be the same: public procurement, transparency, etc. And it's because of the partnerships that come around the country and the issue that allow us to see this progress that has happened over time. So thank you very much. I shall reserve the rest for my podcast. Remember to click like and subscribe. Enjoy your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to ask a question about state reporting.
Yes.
There's no state reporting on the data quality framework. It was endorsed by the Executive Council.